On the 21st of September 2001, London would wake up to some horrifying news. There had been the body of a little boy found in the River Thames. Now, this body was not just a body of a child who had drowned or who had accidentally slipped in. This body was missing their head, as well as their arms and their legs, and essentially the only thing that was left was a torso. Today we are getting into the story of the child that has still not yet been identified and is known as Adam. And for more than 2 decades, investigators, scientists, botanists, anthropologists, and ritual crime investigators have tried to answer the same question. Who was Adam and why was he killed? Welcome to African X-Files. My name is Carrie, and although this story took place in the UK in the Thames River, it has a lot of themes of ritualistic murder that we deal with on this channel. And in fact, investigators from this case in the UK consulted with South Africa's very own Occult crime unit. So if you are interested in a little bit of a crossover, here is the story of Adam. Now, 2001 was not a good year. Just 10 days earlier, the world had been shaken by the 9/11 attacks. Now, I remember where I was that day. I'm sure everyone who experienced that, the news of that breaking, remembers where they were that day. And London was quieter than usual. People were moving around with caution. I think the whole world was a little bit on edge because they were worried about threats of terrorism at this unprecedented incident that had just occurred in America. Now, at around 4 o'clock in the afternoon on the 21st of September 2001, a man named Adrian Minter was walking across Tower Bridge on his way to a business meeting. And as he glanced over at the railing at the River Thames, he noticed something drifting in the river. At first, he thought it was a mannequin, and it is never a mannequin. An odd sight, but not unheard of in the Thames. There's a lot of rubbish that gets thrown in there. And as the object floated closer, the truth was revealed. And Aiden's life would never be the same. He rarely speaks about it, but he is quoted as saying that I'll never forget it for as long as I live. And when police pulled the body from the water near the Globe Theatre, officers stared at something that they had not been trained for. And there was no amount of training that could teach them this, because this was a death that made no sense. A child between the ages of 4 and 8 years old, an African child, had been expertly dismembered and drained of life. There were no signs of neglect. In fact, he seemed as though he had been well fed. There were no signs of SA, no signs of starvation. There was just one chilling detail that he had, and that was that he was wearing a bright orange pair of girls' shorts. The significance of that color is going to perhaps come to us later as we divulge in some of the theories behind the case. So the first question in the case was immediate. Where was the rest of him? So we just had a torso, and police searched among the Thames for days. Drivers combed the riverbeds, officers scoured the alleyways, the bins, the bushes, the tunnels, drainage tunnels for any sign of perhaps where the rest of him could have gone. And Adam's head, arms, and legs have to this day never been found. Forensic teams began to examine of what little remained of him, this little torso, and they discovered that Adam had been fed well. Like I said, there were no signs of starvation, and he had been alive recently, and he had been living well until someone killed him, that is. Now, traces of cough syrup would linger in his stomach. Was he ill? Was he given it to make him sleepy? We are still not sure, but soon scientists would uncover more. In Adam's gut were particles of African river clay mixed with vegetation, round bone, gold, quartz, and ash. It had been burned before the child was forced to swallow it. The bitter taste may have been washed down with the cough syrup to help with, the taste of it. But botanists at Kew Gardens later identified 2 plant remains in his digestive tract, and that of the caliber bean. also known as the doomsday or ordeal plant. This is found in West African traditions, and it is known to paralyze a person but leave them conscious, as well as datura, which is a hallucinogenic sedative, causing confusion, fear, and compliance. Now, this is where the most chilling thing comes in, because combined, they would leave this child unable to move, but still aware of what was happening with him. And it was then that his throat was slit. Now, if you have been following me on my Muti series, you will know that Muti, when it is harvested, it is taken from a child because a child is believed to be more powerful. And also when organs are removed, they have to do it while the person is still alive to imbue it with more power. So this is my first red flag that went up in my head, but we're going to get more into the story later on. So where did Adam come from? Bone analysis would be the next breakthrough. Scientists studied the trace minerals, chemical signatures that had been absorbed during his growth. You see this in archaeological shows the whole time. And they pointed to an area in southwestern Nigeria near Benin City, the birthplace of ancient Yoruba spiritual practices. Now, I'm going to insert here about Yoruba spiritual practices, that these practices are something that it is a beautiful religion, but with all religions, it can be skewed. We see cults and sects form from all different types of religions that can become bad and become extremist. So I'm not saying that all people who practice this religion are involved in this sort of thing. This is just some of the suggestions that have been made, that there is perhaps a cult that has taken these beliefs too far. Now, further tests suggest that Adam had been in the UK only days to weeks before his death. Pollen in his stomach revealed that he had been living somewhere in southeast England, not London, before being transported to the city. So from that, I can infer he was likely transported to the city for the sacrifice. And this narrowed the possibilities because it appeared as though someone had trafficked him. There is a recent arrival, there is no records, no matches in any missing databases, and he was essentially someone that was invisible, and it appeared as though he had been trafficked to the UK in order to be sacrificed as part of some ritualistic murder. Now, ritualistic killings are extremely rare in the UK. It's not the same in South Africa, where there are about 20 to 30 Muti slayings a year. Investigators knew that this was not the work of a deranged local predator, because the way in which the pieces of the body had been removed was expert. It was someone who had done this before, who knew human anatomy, and some suspected a Muti killing. It's a South African ritual in which the victim's body parts are used to create potions. So Muti means medicine, and like I said, it is normally done when the child is alive. This is a real thing. We have an occult unit in South Africa that investigates specifically these murders, and it is used to create potions believed to bring wealth, luck, power. Go check out my occult unit series on this because I explain it all in there. Others pointed to a twisted interpretation of the Yoruba tradition. So this was potentially meant to be a human sacrifice to Oshun, the goddess of water and fertility. Now, both hypotheses, they have one thing in common. Adam's death was deliberate, it was structured, it was symbolic, and someone believed that they would gain something from it. There was something that he has done. And often in Muti sacrifices, I'm not familiar with other ones, but I've just covered Muti on this channel. Often with Muti sacrifices, there's some sort of transfer of life spirit or of power. And to understand the symbolism, the investigators were slowly uncovering. They had to look beyond their police files and forensic labs into a religious world order, older than colonial borders, older than European maps, older than modern states now drawn across West Africa. And at the center, now within days of Adam's discovery, whispers began to spread across Europe. Reporters in London pointed towards a murder just 1 month earlier in the Netherlands. There, the dismembered body of a young white girl had been found floating in a lake. She also had no head, no limbs. This is a grim symmetry towards Adam, enough to make seasoned investigators uneasy. But dust investigators then flew to London, and the police spokesperson told the press that at this stage we are working together to find out whether there is a link between the cases. And the suggestion was chilling. Was someone traveling across Europe killing children. The Thames torso case, now international in scope, was featured on BBC One's Crime Watch. The broadcast triggered a staggering wave of phone calls, but none offered anything that investigators could use. There were still no witnesses, no identifications, no breakthrough. They still did not know who Adam was. Instead, something else began to grow. By mid-October of that year, headlines hinted at a new theory, tentative, uncomfortable, and rather sensational. Papers speculated that both the Dutch murder and the Adam killings might be connected by ritual. Journalists used exotic terms for this, warning of African witch doctors, body part magic, and dark ceremonies. They borrowed the South African word sangoma, claiming these figures used remains to make potions. Now, while this does occur in South Africa, I must say that sangomas in South Africa are very spiritual. They are considered spiritual healers. They are not involved in any bad things at all. So that is a common misconception. The people who are alleged to be involved in Muti killings in South Africa are known as witch doctors, not sangomas. Sangoma is something very different, and they will get very offended if you call them a witch doctor. That is an important discrepancy to make, or accuse them of being involved in Muti killings, because they simply do not do that. Now, this is the kind of language that fed fear and controversy. In May, detectives would widen their search in the direction that no one expected. They began investigating a cold case, a murder that had taken place 34 years earlier, and this was in 1969. Back then, a headless torso of a baby girl had been found hidden in a thick undergrowth of Epping Forest in Essex. And the similarities between the cases were rather unsettling. She was young, she was dismembered, her limbs and her head were missing. Police, reviewing their files, discovered that the murdered child had been killed by her own parents. But before British authorities could arrest the father, he fled the country. He vanished into the world, leaving horror in his wake. Meanwhile, Dutch police, who were reviewing their files of these two incidences, Adam and the girl, they were said to be unrelated, as Dutch police realized that her parents were potentially responsible. Now, Detective Inspector Will O'Reilly addressed reporters, and he would say that we are looking at the 1969 case because of the ritualistic overtones. The father was down on his luck and apparently carried out the killing to change that. Now, this is a bleak echo. The idea that suffering of a child could be twisted into the promise of luck, fortune, or even spiritual gain is something that many of us cannot comprehend. The investigating scope was then broadened, and as May continued, concern spread. Police commanders from across Europe gathered at The Hague for a one-day conference, and behind closed doors, they compared notes and grim reports, and they compared their strange cases and unexplained death. And Commander Andy Becky spoke to police and the press afterwards. They found out that ritualistic murders of children across Europe was pushing double figures. The sentence landed like a blow. If true, then Adam's death wasn't a lone tragedy. It was part of something larger, something spreading, something yet that no one quite yet understood. And Detective Inspector Will O'Reilly, leading the Thames investigation, would explain the possibility of ritual murder had been raised by a pathologist and not the tabloids. So this was something that was then taken off by the newspapers and then confirmed by the police, because a South African pathologist who specialized in identifying Muti killings would fly in to the UK and do a second autopsy on Adam. And they would conclude that the wounds, the precision, the draining of blood was indeed linked to something ritualistic. And this also coincided with another discovery that had been found in the Thames, and that was 7 half-burnt candles wrapped carefully in a white sheet. It was immediately suspected that these were part of what had occurred to Adam, and then written across the cloth was a name, Adikoye Adoyai, and presidents held out the sheet for cameras. The flames of speculation ignited immediately, and O'Reilly, the head of the detective, was said to have stated that if this murder was indeed ritualistic, it would be the first in the country. We know with certainty that the candles and the sheet form perhaps some part of the ceremony, but we cannot say if they are connected. But at the moment, we are not linking them. Now, the media leapt into the Yoruba connection. Reports suggested that the name originated in West Africa, probably Nigeria, and aligning uncomfortably with the forensic findings that had already been happening around Adam. Now, suddenly the theory of a European child killer faded. Dutch detectives stepped back, investigated. The cases were unlinked about that little girl who was found floating, and investigators quietly abandoned the idea that the two cases were related. But the panic didn't stop because another thread emerged. Police began liaising with authorities in Germany and Belgium, where 3 other similar cases had been reported recently. Bodies found dismembered, disposed in waterways, no clear motives, no suspects. And this began to lead to questions. Was this a network, a pattern operating across Europe? The South African pathologist came to their findings, and it was said that in their opinion, the discovery of the body, features of external examination, including the nature of the wounds, clothing, and mechanism of death, are consistent with those of a ritual homicide practiced in Africa. Now, with that sentence, speculation hardened into fear. The idea of ritual murder, one whispered, was now official. For a moment, the investigation seemed to gain direction. Now, by February, detectives had ruled out the most sensational pieces of evidence. So remember that white sheet and those 7 half-burnt candles that were found in the Thames? Well, working with the New York Police Department, they traced the name that was featured on that police and to a young man who had been living in New York. And his family, who lived in London, had held a ceremony to celebrate that he had survived the September 11th attack on the World Trade Center. And the candles and the cloth had drifted into the river by mistake and had somehow ended up along with Adam. As pressure mounted on investigators, and I must say that they definitely tried to solve this case, they threw everything at it, even the kitchen sink. Attention shifted to a part of the world deeply familiar with ritual symbolism. Detectives flew to South Africa, where they met the South African Police Occult Crimes Unit, a specialized branch of specially trained detectives accustomed to darker intersections between belief and violence. So, accompanied by reporters and a television crew and local officers, the team visited a sprawling market where traditional medicines were openly sold. Stalls displayed animal bones, dried organs, herbs, feathers, powders, and charms. Some were used in harmless folk healing. Orange garment is said to be associated with apologies, and it was essentially an apology offered to the soul of the dead. The healer also alleged that the perpetrators were following of something he called Oba, which he described as a West African variation of witchcraft. To investigators, it was a clue threaded with geography. And Muti told them to look in West Africa. From Nigeria onwards, this is where these people are from. The detectives listened. Whether they fully believed it or not, we will never know, but the trail was leaving away from Europe and we were going deeper into Africa. Now, the only item of clothing found on his body became a vital clue. It was that pair of orange shorts, and they belonged to a girl, even though we know Adam was a boy. And the orange girls' shirts were manufactured specifically for a brand called Kids & Company. The color and size combination was sold only in a limited number of stores, and it was found to be in Germany. Investigators turned their attention to this newest lead back to Europe. Had Adam passed through Germany on his way to London? The idea was horrifying: a child trafficked across many European borders for ritualistic murder. Police did something unprecedented, and that is when they gave the child a name, Adam. They offered a £50,000 reward, and when the press covered the story, but interest waned because terror dominated the headlines. Remember, this was 10 days away from 2001. While the investigators were in South Africa, Nelson Mandela spoke publicly, and he spoke publicly about the case, offering a plea to anyone who has any information. And he said, if anywhere, even in the remotest village of our continent, there is a family missing a son of that age, please contact the police. The appeal was aired across Africa. It was translated into many local languages, including Yoruba. And for a moment, hope flickered, but no one came forward. Of the word stands Oshun. Now, in the Yoruba tradition, Oshun is an Orisha, a divinity of fresh water, fertility, diplomacy, beauty, prosperity, and sweet speech. She is not an obscure figure. Her principal shrine lies along the Oshun River at Oshogbo, a sprawling sacred thick grove with sculptures, scriptures, shrines, stations, and ceremonial pathways. It is still active today. It is a recognized UNESCO World Heritage Site, and this is a landscape. It is a very peaceful place. It is, not a relic. Now, this is a very peaceful religion. So like I said, people can obscure it for their own deeds. Now, every year, thousands gather there for the Oshun festival, a renewal of the town's ancient covenant with the river goddess. The entire community is said to participate in acts of cleansing, remembrance, and blessing. And at the heart of the ceremony is Aruba, a concentrated young woman who carries a calabash filled with sacrificial items to the river on behalf of everyone. The procession is something that is said to be spectacular, but the purpose is simpler: to maintain balance and fertility and civic health. So for outsiders, the word sacrifice conjures violence, but in Yoruba thought, the concept Igbo is far broader. It can be food, cloth, service, vows, labor, or symbolic objects. Traditionally under priestly oversight, it can include animals. People are not usually sacrificed. It is prescribed by the Ifa divination system after reading a person's circumstances, their lineage, their obligations. It is not random, it is not improvised, it's a negotiation. In principles, offering to Oshun reflect her nature, sweetness. So this is honey, pumpkins, mirrors, yellow and amber cloth, jewelry, river-related items, which I want you to remember because this is going to feature. Bronze and brass, and some lineages, foal or goats may be offered after a divination determines it appropriate. In others, non-animal sacrificing offers emphasized, such as gold. Now, variation exists across communities, both in Nigeria and throughout Afro-Atlantic diaspora. Because Oshun traveled not physically but spiritually across the ocean during the slave trade, in Cuba she appears as Oshun, in Brazil, Oxum. There too she retains her sweetness, her beauty, her color, and her association with the water. In public places, she has been synchronized with Catholic icons such as Our Lady of Charity, but behind closed doors, these lineages, they maintain their own forms, governed by ordained priests, not amateurs. These traditions are not chaotic, they are bounded. They are contained by taboos, lineage rulings, and divination authority. Classic scholars have determined that sacrifice within Yoruba is thought to be an ethical contract, a mechanism to maintain harmony between humans, nature, ancestors, and the divine. It is not a spectre, it is not opportunist violence. Yet as the investigation into the Thames torso progressed, detectives encountered twisted rumors, distorted fragments of Yoruba cosmology as they faced a chilling possibility. Someone had taken symbols from a religion that had been founded on balance, on beauty, and had allegedly reshaped them into horror. And this is when we go on to Glasgow. So in July 2002, social workers in Glasgow grew concerned about the safety of two young girls who were living with their mother, Joyce Oshun, and she was an African woman in her early 30s. Inside her flat, when they visited it to do a welfare check, they found various ritualistic objects. At a hearing to determine custody, Joyce talked nervously about cults, sacrifices, and threats, saying that she had escaped one, and an officer attending that hearing thought of her vague references and that it sounded familiar to that of Adam, and he contacted the homicide unit. And that is when detectives searched her home. They found clothing with the same Kids and Company logo and in the same sizes as Adam's shorts. Now, was she involved? We don't know. She was never arrested, but she changed her story constantly, and officers couldn't charge her. Instead, she remained in the UK as she awaited asylum, and police watched and waited. But when her asylum claim was rejected, authorities deported her. Detectives accompanied her on a private jet, hoping that she might finally talk, but she never did. When they landed in Lagos, Joyce walked off the plane and disappeared. Later, German police revealed that she had previously been living in Hamburg, the exact place those orange shorts were sold, and the circle tightened. After tracing numbers in Joyce's phone, police located a man by the name of Musa Kamara. In his home, they found an animal skull that had been pierced with a nail. Now, this is a sign of power or justice. In the Congo region, religious specialists make these power objects, which are known as mangisi. and people drive nails, pegs, or blades into these objects to awaken them, to seal oaths, to call a spirit, to pursue wrongdoers, or to mark the seriousness of a petition. In his flat, they also found small packets of sand and earth, mysterious liquids, and a videotape labeled rituals showing a man being beheaded. I mean, that is some gross stuff that they found in there. And they found that Komoro's real name was Kingsley Ojo, and he was released because of a lack of evidence linking him directly to Adam, but investigators noticed something else. He was trafficking humans, and many of those that he trafficked were children. So in July 2003, after months of surveillance, detectives conducted coordinated raids across London. 21 people were arrested, Ojo among them. The charges were for smuggling as well as for falsifying documents. And in July 2004, he received a 4-year sentence, and police believe that he knew more about Adam, but they could never prove it. Now, Ojo was sentenced to serve out his sentence in Brixton prison, and he gained influence in the prison. He was known as a big man. He allegedly performed juju ceremonies for other inmates. He contacted detectives claiming that he had hidden recordings of revelations about Adam's murder, but he promised to cooperate, but he never did. For a time, investigators entertained him, they believed him, but when he was released, Ojo stayed in London, supposedly helping the inquiry for 2 years. He fed them false leads. He claimed Joyce wasn't returning, and he accused others and pointed the finger everywhere, but police eventually concluded that he was manipulating them and he didn't really know anything. Now we have to fast forward to December 2006, 5 years after his murder. Adam's remains were buried in a quiet London cemetery. A handful of officers attended. Men who never stopped caring about Adam, and they, like I said, they threw everything at this case, even the kitchen sink. His grave was unmarked, and he was just one small boy, what was left of him, buried alone. Now, in 2011, detectives discovered photographs among belongings that Joyce had left behind in Germany. One image showed a young boy staring into the camera. It was taken in around 2001, and Joyce claimed that this was a picture of Adam. She called him Ik Pumusa. She said she had cared for him and handed him over to a man named Bawa. But nothing added up. Investigators could still not confirm the identity. And in 2013, journalists tracked down Joyce in Nigeria. She appeared confused. Now she said that the boy's name was Patrick Urkabor. The photograph she once identified was not the same child at all. Detectives noted that she was perhaps not as mentally stable, and she vanished again. Meanwhile, her brother claimed the photo was wrongly circulated, and the search again slipped through police fingers. By 2013, the case grew cold. Police were sitting at square one. They had no confirmed identity, no family, no limbs, no head, no cause beyond speculation. And then a tragedy. That same year, Joyce died. One of the last people who perhaps had possible answers was gone forever. Now, as forensic scientists continued to study the strange mixture that was found in Adam's stomach, a troubling picture began to form. What first seemed like random debris, flecks of clay, ground bone, mineral dust, soon revealed a pattern rooted in history, belief, and ritual. To understanding the meaning of this, we have to look backwards across centuries. So the first ingredient identified was that caliper bean. We've talked about that, which is an extremely toxic seed related to southwestern Nigeria. For generations, certain communities used it that were known as ordeal rituals. When a person was accused of theft, adultery, or witchcraft, they might be forced to swallow an extract of the bean. If they vomited and survived, they were considered innocent. If they died, guilt was assumed. This reminds me of when they used to dunk the witches in England. Its purpose was not random violence, it was a spiritual truth test, a deadly way to call judgment down on an unseen world. And the second plant came from an entirely different tradition, datura, sometimes known as devil's trumpet. This has a long association with visions, hallucinations, and altered states. Across the Americas, certain indigenous groups used datura during dangerous initiation rituals. In Europe, it's delirium-inducing chemicals whispered into legends of witches flying ornaments. And this would result in hallucination, paralysis, suspectability. Combined with the caliber bean, the child would have remained conscious, like I said, trapped but unable to move. And then there was the burned clay that was found. Ash blackened fragments mixed with ritual paste around the world. Fired clay has carried offerings to spirits, been beneath foundations to anchor protection, and shaped into effigies presenting ancestors. In European folk magic, clay bottles were heated in fires to trap malevolent forces, sealing them away. And then we have to talk about the bone powder, which was also found in his stomach, pulverized fragments representing the essence of life and death. In Tibetan Buddha ritual art, ground bone pigments colored sacred mandalas. Central African power objects, bone dusk invoked ancestors to witness justice. And in European folk magic, ground bone was used in blessings, banishing, and curses. Surrounding it all, shivered traces of quartz, a crystal that has always been associated with purity and power. And native medicine specialists use it for scything, focusing energy, and rainmaking. And early European mystics gazed into it. That's where the crystal ball comes from, seeking visions from the unseen. And woven throughout the mixture was gold. Gold is considered something that is pure, incorruptible, forever tied to royalty and divinity. Ancient Egyptians believed gold was the flesh of the gods. The Akan people of West Africa used gold weights as tokens of lineage and cosmic balance. Remember the same thing about lineage coming up. And medieval churches enshrined relics in gold to preserve sacred power. Together, if we can combine it, we can think of the clay as a vessel, the bone as ancestry, the quartz as the spirit, the gold as divine authority, and the toxic plants as keys to invisible doors that only Adam could have gone through. Across West and Central Africa, similar combinations appear in those power objects I spoke about, those Niski objects, and they are meant to call justice, protect communities, or bind spirits. In multiple cultures, burnt clay, minerals, and precious materials are placed beneath the foundations to stabilize the soul of a building. And as these investigators re-examined all these parts, along with the removal of the head and limbs, they still agreed that this was consistent with ritual designed to sever the victim's spiritual connection and prevent their spirit from returning. But the orange shorts revealed something deeper. South African Muti experts had stated that red or orange symbolized resurrection. The garment may have been chosen by someone who felt guilt, someone related to him, perhaps joy, we will never know, someone trying to apologize to his soul. That theory twists like a knife. Did a family member walk this child to death? Meanwhile, the man who found Adam, Aiden, developed acute post-traumatic stress disorder. And in an interview he gave, he said he still thinks about the boy. He has nightmares. He said the hardest part was not understanding. He was a small boy with a personality, and he was so cruelly taken away. Scotland Yard later stated that the publicity surrounding Adam's case likely prevented further ritual killings in Britain. It forced law enforcement to learn how to identify ritualistic killing, track trafficking patterns, and collaborate with African experts. Adam may have saved many lives without even meaning to. Today, more than 20 years later, his identity remains officially unknown. His family, if alive, either doesn't know he's gone or cannot safely speak his name. And there are probably possibilities of doing genetic testing, genetic genealogy, but this is not as widespread in Africa as it is overseas. And yet one thing has become clear. Someone loved him enough to clothe him, someone killed him believing that they would gain power, and someone transported him across countries. Someone silenced him. But in a quiet cemetery in London, a small grave holds what remains of a child that the world failed to protect. He is still called Adam because no one ever learned anything else. If you know anything at all, you can still contact UK authorities. Cold cases don't stay cold forever. Sometimes truth melts through the ice, and sometimes all it takes is someone who is finally willing to talk. Until next time, stay curious, stay aware, and if you see something that doesn't feel right, speak up for Adam. Good night. This is Carrie from the African X-Files.